So tell us a little bit about the book.
The book is a hard-hitting expose into the what I define as an incestuous dynamic between Wall Street and Washington, in which literally billions of dollars flow from Wall Street, filling the coffers of Washington, and what comes back is a lax regulatory system. But it's more than that. In looking into the system and looking into that intersection, there's very meaningful levels of corruption within the system. And I'm not the first to say that transparency is truly the great disinfectant, and that was the reason why I wrote the book, to bring real transparency and hopefully lead to meaningful levels of reform.
And what have the impacts been so far?
The impacts have been numerous. First and foremost, I've received a lot of support from many colleagues on Wall Street. I've certainly hit the beehive within the regulatory system, whether it's at FINRA or the SEC specifically, very hard. And they're very aware of my book and the issues that I've raised, including the names, dollar figures, significant supporting documentation of very real corruption within the system. One of the SEC actually said, "Why don't you come work for us?" And then I said, well, then I'd be in bed with Wall Street too. And I don't want to be in bed with Wall Street. So it's raised the level of dialogue. Some of the reforms have occurred at the margin, and there remains endless amounts of work.
And what do you think is next for the reform effort?
Well, I think what's next is that I believe the issues that I raise in my book will be very much on the campaign for the 2016 election. We're already seeing the likes of Senator Elizabeth Warren and others, Bernie Sanders, but ultimately the issues that I address in my book are not a question of right versus left, but really right versus wrong. And this is, I view, as the ultimate bipartisan issue. So whether it's Rand Paul on one side, Bernie Sanders on the other, really this just gets into bringing meaningful integrity back into the system, because despite the fact that the markets have come back to the highs, the dislocation between Wall Street and Main Street remains as wide as ever.
And almost every day where there are fines or settlements.
Very unhealthy. Yeah, those fines and settlements are ultimately little more than a cost of doing business, and continues to erode the trust and confidence of the general public. That's not healthy for our markets. That's not healthy for Wall Street. Really what this ultimately, though, is it's a failure of leadership. Failure of leadership not only on Wall Street, but also in Washington. And that's why I wrote the book, to raise the issues.
So lastly, do you think the Republicans will be able to repeal Dodd-Frank or parts of it, or some of the reforms that have already been in place?
Well, first off, Dodd-Frank was this massive law. Here we are 5 years after the fact, and there's still significant parts of it that the legislation hasn't even been written. So certainly they're going to try to dial that back, and I think that they will be able to dial some of it back for the very simple reason that ultimately Wall Street's checks get cashed in Washington, and they expect payback, and they typically get it.